It's not such a wild idea when you look at it from the Trump White House, because there's a great big chunk of land that they see as more in the North American continent than the European continent, and of an enormous strategic importance, not to mention all the mineral resources that are becoming much easier to exploit thanks to global warming, or climate change, as we should call it, I suppose.
And it is the Trump dump, and we're joined by David Charter, who is the US Assistant Editor for The Times. Good evening to you, David.
Good afternoon from Washington, D.C.
Yes, good afternoon to you where you are. Donald Trump, we understand, currently hosting this meeting on what Gaza might look like after Israel's war with Hamas is over. It includes the Israeli Foreign Minister and the likes of former Middle East envoy Jared Kushner and the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, we also understand is there. The topics on the table include food aid deliveries, the hostage crisis, and, as I said, plans for Gaza once peace has been attained. That comes as the Israeli military has told Palestinians that the evacuation of Gaza City is inevitable. Here is the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. He was speaking on Fox News last night about the meeting today.
We've got a large meeting in the White House tomorrow, chaired by the president, and it's a very comprehensive plan we're putting together on the next day that I think many people are going to be, they're going to see how robust it is and how well-meaning it is. And it reflects President Trump's humanitarian motives here.
Have we heard anything from the White House at all? What is being said about the presence of Tony Blair, for instance? What have you got for us on this, David?
Yes, I was just over at the White House, actually, and it's all quiet. There was no sign of the participants in the meeting, so I think they're all locked in a room somewhere at the moment. So if there's anything breaking from that, we'll let you know later, I think. But it's interesting that Tony Blair himself seems to have been involved for many months, if not a couple of years, actually, with this process of trying to find a resolution since the October 7th attacks took place. Certainly, he's been involved, obviously, on the hostage front. He's still got a lot of contacts in the Middle East because he was a peace envoy, a special envoy for the so-called quartet of powers: the UN, the EU, the US, and Russia, for 8 years. From 2007 to 2015, he spent a lot of time based in Israel, making contacts on all sides. And it's interesting that he's been turned to not, first of all, by the Biden administration, but now through his friendship with Jared Kushner, who is obviously Trump's son-in-law, married to Ivanka, he was the broker of a deal called the Abraham Accords in the first term for some Arab countries to recognize Israel. And basically, Tony Blair's never been away. He's been consulted on so many of these movements in the Middle East. And as I say, he appears to be locked in a White House meeting as we speak.
Yeah, and separately, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to meet the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar in Washington. That is still taking place, or will all that melee in together, do you think?
Actually, they're meeting at the State Department this afternoon, so I don't know about the crossover with the meeting at the White House. That remains to be seen. But it's no coincidence that you've got the Israeli Foreign Minister in, because there are, as you probably know, quite detailed plans being drawn up in Israel for the future of Gaza. The question is whether that can be acceptable to whoever's going to represent the Palestinians. And of course, that's not clear, because there's not going to be anyone from Hamas in these meetings, and even the Palestinian Authority, its participation is unclear. So once again, we're wondering if this is a plan that's a bit one-sided at the moment.
Yes, yeah, that is the question. I mean, look, in terms of getting to the point where there is a post-war Gaza, No doubt if Donald Trump does take any questions or if we hear from him later on, he'll be asked about ceasefire negotiations. And I think, look, Israel's been clear, hasn't it, in the last few weeks about where they are, and that is that they don't want any phased deal. They want all the hostages or they carry on, and they're already on the outskirts of Gaza. And as we say, it looks absolutely inevitable that citizens will need to leave and they will be taking over the city. And the US is also backing Israel's position on that. It needs to be a release of all the hostages all at once, not a phased release, which is what Hamas have agreed to as it stands.
Yeah, Trump was asked about this the other day, and he basically said, well, that's Israel's call. He was asked about the plans to go in and take control of Gaza City, which is what the operation that's just seems to be starting right now, and displacing tens of thousands of people. And yeah, Trump said that's their call. Basically, he's going along with the Israeli military plans, and always has done. There's not been a sign of him trying to impose a ceasefire or to take measures to force a ceasefire. He remains all in with the Israeli cabinet's wanting to totally destroy Hamas. And even though, as you say, there are signs that they've come round to a deal that we thought Israel was close to agreeing a month ago, and Hamas came round a couple of weeks ago, and still there's no ceasefire. So I think it tells its own story at the moment.
Yeah, Witkoff saying overnight, evening US time yesterday, he was asked why he's optimistic about bringing an end to the war. He said, we're going to settle this one way or another, certainly before the end of this year. So that's him putting a bit of a time limit on it, which is another interesting point to it. Let's talk about India tariffs, because these came into effect today. US tariffs of 50% on Indian goods. This is a 25% sanction. This includes a 25% sanction as a consequence of India's purchase of Russian oil, which in turn, of course, goes towards funding Russia's campaign in Ukraine. Until recently, the US was India's largest trading partner, even. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi saying today has promised to cut taxes to minimise the pinch felt by Indian citizens. I wonder about the effect on US citizens if we go the other way on this, first of all, David.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there'll be a big impact on US citizens either at the moment, because, as you know, the companies that do importing and exporting have been stocking up tremendously in the early months of this year, as soon as they knew this was coming down the pipe. What the bigger blow really is to, I think, to America's relations on the geopolitical stage. That Trump and Modi, we all thought, got on really well. They've had some very friendly visits to each other's countries over the years. And of course, India is really a key ally in America's confrontation with China for basically dominance in the Indo-Pacific area. And, well, a lot of the commentary is focused over here on putting a key relationship at risk. He's also put noses out of joint in India, of course, by suggesting he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for making peace between India and Pakistan, which India totally rejected and said it was nothing to do with Trump, although Pakistan says he did have a role. So it did stop the shooting between India and Pakistan, the agreement. But India has not been very happy with Trump lately.
Yeah, let's touch on the school shooting, if we can, in Minneapolis. 2 children have been killed, 17 injured. It's a primary school, a Catholic primary school in Minneapolis. Here's the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, speaking earlier.
These were American families. And the amount of pain that they are suffering right now is extraordinary. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance.
Yeah, you can feel the absolutely justified emotion wrapped up in those words from the Minneapolis mayor. We covered this at 7 o'clock, David, but since we did, we now have an ID, don't we, for the attacker, Robin Westman.
Right. So, yeah, the reports are that the 23-year-old shooter, known as Robin Westman, was born Robert Westman and changed their name in 2020 because they then identified as female. I don't know whether this psychology has got anything to do with the shooting, but the motive is still being investigated. But these are the interesting new details that have come out in the last hour or so. And really, it's just another one of these inexplicably awful American school shootings that unfortunately come around, and goes without saying, every parent's worst nightmare. You know, I've got kids at school. They do shooter drills where they've got to, barricade the door and get under the desk and that sort of thing. It is part of the fabric of American life, unfortunately.
Yeah. I want to touch on Denmark as well, because the top US diplomat in Denmark has been summoned to Copenhagen. This happened today. It's over alleged covert operations in Greenland. So Danish intelligence has accused the United States of conducting influence operations aimed at promoting Greenland's secession from Denmark to the United States. The allegation is that there are at least 3 US citizens on the ground in Greenland trying to influence the state of affairs there, trying to get the public on side. We spoke to Rasmus Jarlof earlier, Danish MP and chair of the country's defence committee. Here he is.
He will be called in for a conversation with our Minister of Foreign Affairs, and it will be made clear to him that we don't accept that the Americans are trying to take over Greenland, which should be very, very obvious. It's really difficult to work well with the Americans, work across borders, if we don't agree on where the border is and what is the United States and what is Greenland and what is Denmark. And it's really a basic condition that we have to have if we're going to be working together, supporting each other and being allies. Because I don't think a lot of people are going to find it very valuable to be allied with a country that feels like it has a right to take territory from so-called allies.
Yeah, I mean, it still feels like a wild idea, doesn't it, that America should annex Greenland. But whether they're at the behest of the White House or, these 3 people or these US citizens are taking their own initiative on it, David, there are, clearly people trying to influence over on the ground in Greenland.
Well, it's not such a wild idea when you look at it from the Trump White House, because there's a great big chunk of land that they see as more in the North American continent than the European continent, and of an enormous strategic importance, not to mention all the mineral resources that are becoming much easier to exploit thanks to global warming, or climate change, as we should call it, I suppose. So this is not even the first time under Trump that the US, I was going to say ambassador, the chargé d'affaires, the senior diplomat in Denmark, has been summoned, because they were also summoned a couple of months ago when there was another inquiry announced into by the Trump cabinet into potentially how they could influence Denmark to cede Greenland. So there's clearly not going away. And as fantastical as it sounded at first, the Americans actually are deadly serious that they need to, a minimum, to keep Greenland in their sphere of influence. That's probably not the best way to go about it. But at the maximum, to make it a part of American territory. So it does seem that the the influence campaign is quite intriguing. It's trying to revive historic grievances between the Greenlanders and the Danish over a historic scandal where thousands of Greenlandic women were forced to be fitted with contraceptive coils supposedly in an effort to suppress the birth rate. Now, this is something that goes back many decades, but you can see the potential for it to cause bad feeling between Greenland and Denmark. And in fact, there's not a lot of love lost in any case. There are separatist movements, and they do want more autonomy and self-control. It's just they don't want to be part of America, as far as we can work out.
No, I mean, the polling says not anything from 85% upwards are against the idea. David, thank you very much for being with us. Quite a diverse range of stories there that we've covered. As ever, David is an excellent source of information. And his and the US team's writing, their journalism, can be found across thetimes.com and, of course, in the paper on a daily basis as well. Thank you for being with us once again. It's been the Trump Dump. David Charter is US Assistant Editor for The Times.